to you. To find out more, give them a call at 844-SAD-5050. That's 844-SAD-5050. South Pacific Sleep Lab. Start resting easy and sleeping sound today.
You're listening to an encore presentation of this program, KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. Today, like every week, we'll be discussing critical legal issues affecting our communities. And today we're going to be start talking about part 2 of the community violence and intervening to stop the bloodshed that we were speaking about last week. We also going to be talking a little bit about the Kanye West issue with the White House, his being invited and his rant. But at any rate, joining us today with our topic like last week is our own in-house expert, Dr. Akil Bashir, to chime in on the issue of the community violence, and we'll also be furthering our discussion on the book that he wrote. It's called Peace in the Hood, Working with Gang Members to End Violence. It's a great read. I think last week we didn't have an opportunity to kind of give you some information about this book. It's an excellent read. It has actually a foreword by Pete Carroll, who's actually the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And I believe he was also USC's head football coach as well. This book, you can get it on all of your major bookstores, including Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles. So it's out there, and it's a great read. And if you really want to understand the things going on within our community and the issues of violence and gangs, then I would suggest that you actually go out and read this book. And we're going to be talking about the subject matter as well as the book again. I think that basically we might want to talk a little bit about your boy, Dr. Bashir, Kanye West, and his recent and his recent visit to the White House. You know, I think he was, it was really interesting. You got a lot of different takes on what was really going on. I mean, obviously the most common feedback that we got was his mental issues. They think that he basically literally is losing his mind. Then you have other individuals who think that basically it's a ploy, that he's a genius and it's a ploy, either for something that's going to benefit himself. I've even heard, some theories where they said that basically that he went in there and he basically is going to trick Donald Trump into doing something for black people. I heard that one today. They said he went in there and he talked about mental health, talked about several different issues. There were issues that we had been talking about before, but President Trump didn't listen to it. And now that Kanye's in there talking, that he was basically paying attention to the issue of mental health, which is something that obviously people on the other side of the fence have been talking about for a long period of time. With Kanye, he's I think number one, to be quite honest with you, is that we probably give him a lot more attention than he probably deserves. But he is being called to the White House, and he's actually getting, obviously, what he's asking for, and that's a significant amount of attention. And I think that a lot of what he's doing could be for that reason. I don't know Kanye West. I'm not a mental health professional, so I really can't call what his motive is. I can say that basically the fact that he went to the White House and he made those statements and acted the way that he did, regardless of what his motive is probably very detrimental to him and detrimental to us as a community. I know that he doesn't represent the community. That's for sure. And he wasn't representing the community when he made those, made his statements, and he's wearing the hat and he's hugging Donald Trump and he's saying that he's Superman, that makes him feel like Superman. All those ridiculous statements. So, I don't know. I can't call it. I don't know what he's up to. I know that basically it's sad to see that, you know, an individual like that, that early on in his career, I believe that he was actually, you know, and I think that people have to understand that a lot of the artists, especially within that community, the hip-hop community, that come out of Chicago were normally seen as individuals that were seen as being very conscious. If you remember some of his early music, then he was very conscious, even a lot of the music that he was making, especially when it came to materialism, and the High School Dropout album that he did. And you know, he was seen as someone who was very brilliant. I know that basically he, at least from, you know, what I've gathered and the information that I know about him, I understand that he comes from, his mother was an educator, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Do we know that?
I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that he was one of those kids that came out of Chicago that at least gave me the image that he was more of a, you know, someone that was what we would normally consider to be conscious. That was my impression of him initially. But obviously, you know, as time went on, and it seems like things got more and more and more and more and more bizarre. I think that what happens is that you have many of the theories make sense. I mean, you have an individual who was raised by a single mother, and when you don't have a good woman to hold you down, sometimes you don't have somebody to put you in check, you know.
Well, I think Maya Angelou said it best: when they show you who they are the first time, believe them. And what you saw was a classic case of buffoonery. I'm just going to be frank. No, we don't know his motives. We don't know his intent, but we do have to judge by actions. And those of us that understand looking at human behavior, you judge a person on their actions, their characteristics, and their behaviors. Now, I think what you saw when we talk about mental health, yeah, I think he does have a mental health problem, but I don't think the mental health people normally assume. This man has a perpetuated self-hate, and he has a problem with himself, and that reflection is thrown on everybody else of the same nature. When you look at what the policies of this country has done to people of color and black people, and then you embrace those policies, or you embrace the institutor of those policies, you do have to question the psychological balance that an individual is bringing to the table. Whether Kanye wants to or not, he is put into somewhat of a leadership position or a leadership role because of the people that he touches, and especially the youth that he touches. So when, as I said on one of the earlier shows, when we understand and when we assume that leadership, whether we're chosen or we assume that leadership if respected by those who will allow us to lead them, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to the people you serve. You have a responsibility to that community, and you have a responsibility to call unjust situations what they are. For you to look at self-ingratiated grandeur, or you to try to promote yourself, I think that's what we see here. Those of us clearly know that are truly down in this work. You don't have to compromise to be recognized, okay? They have to be able to take you as you are. And this is what we're talking about, this is what we're talking about when we talk about true integrity, standing up for that which we serve and that which we believe in. So at the end of the day, if Kanye was sitting in front of me with no hesitation, I would call him out. I would call him out on the Amos and Andy attitude. I would call him out on the uncompromising negatives that he imposed on the community. And let me end with this, Brother Ali. See, there's a lot of people that look to Kanye and his music on an international scope that have had no engagement with black people. And when they hear a black person talking like this, and they have had no interaction, no physical, no mental, no actual tangible touching with those individuals, they start to form concepts. And they believe that people, and that black people, because of Kanye's reach, they believe a lot of black people actually embrace this negated self-hate and embrace these policies that are self-destructive.
I don't know if they really, my thing is that I don't know if they really believe it. I think that they really, they're looking obviously for someone to create that conflict. So in other words, do they really believe that the majority of the black people, support someone like Kanye West and what he does? But I think it's almost like a slap in the face. You know what I mean? I think it's almost like when we can take one of yours and we can flip him, and here he is. I think that sometimes I think it's more of I get kind of a vindictive vibe, Doc.
Oh, I would agree with you, but I was referring to those younger adults who listen to his music, who have embraced his music. And one of the things that the man does well is he sells music, and that's where he needs to stay in that lane. But my point is, there's a lot of people that, especially a younger generation, that doesn't have that strategic thinking capability yet. So they assume when they hear it from somebody as prominent as Kanye that it has validity to it. I would agree with you 100% on those older individuals, those decision makers. I think they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, they love to put us in a situation like that.
Early on in his when we first started hearing about Kanye West, I actually embraced the dude, especially when he came out with the United College Negro Fund, and he spoke out against, Katrina, and how the government was, they was lazy in responding to the victims of Katrina.
And George Bush,
he called people. And he called him out. And the thing about it was, I enjoyed the fact that he was able to use his platform in order to get the message out that this was being done to a lot of the victims of Katrina. But then also he came back later on, and I don't know if you remember, I think it was the Emmy or the Grammy Award, where he stood up and talked about Taylor Swift opposed to Beyonce, and that's when he first started getting a lot of the, the recognition and stuff like that, and people starting to really look at Kanye. In those days, we enjoyed the fact that he used that platform. But then I think it goes back to what you were saying, Mr. Ali, is in terms of, someone that stands out amongst our youth, and then you can twist them and then put it back out there in a negative frame of mind. Because how many people that then went to the White House and had a meeting with the president? But this particular person, he gets all of this media attention and all of these antics. I seen him a couple of weeks ago going to one of the universities, standing on top of the table, cussing everybody out about messing with the CEO of Tesla, And I think that, by them putting it out there, this negative energy, I think they just want to get somebody crazy to represent, the African-American community, and saying, look how crazy this dude is, And I think it's like a slap in the face, It
is. I think we got a caller.
Yes, I'm very interested in this subject now. Kanye's mother, Dante West, she was a professor. Yes, she definitely was educated. He was brought up. He's not a stupid person. But what you've seen here was mental health at its finest. I'm telling you, this guy really ain't taking his medicine. And don't let Jim Brown off. Jim Brown, cool.
Thank you.
They had a platform. They had an international platform. Jim Brown said, I don't want nothing from you. He might as well say, I don't want nothing from you, master.
Yeah.
I'm just here to serve. Don't let Jim Brown know. Kanye got an excuse. He ain't taking his millions.
Yeah.
What's up with Jim Brown? Maybe he threw too many women out the window when he was doing his thing. I was up on this American thing, man. I was so shocked. He said, well, he don't want nothing from this man. Now you got Kanye up here crazy, poor man. I really felt so bad for him, man. I'm not lying.
Yeah.
I felt bad for him. Because white people, I'm going there. White people, that's just how all of us thought. And he's trying to get votes from a crazy man. Right. These tornadoes, hurricanes in Florida, and you taking you sitting down with this man?
Right. And the subject matter was supposed to be about criminal justice reform. Well, why would you go and get Kanye? What does Kanye West know about criminal justice reform?
Nothing.
Right.
He ain't been to jail in his life. And then Larry Hoover, these youngsters. I know what I was doing in my life. These youngsters don't care nothing about Larry Hoover. Larry Hoover can't change nothing. They had Larry Hoover's lawyer right there. These youngsters, I'm telling you, they ain't care nothing about Dale Dog. They don't care nothing about. These youngsters got their own platform right now. And if you ain't with it, I mean, that's why you got to talk to them young.
Right.
You got to talk to them young. It should be something in schools to really, just like your stop and frisk. Now, Trump goes, I'm saying, wait a minute. He goes and he wants to stop and frisk
New York.
across the board. He just wants to stopping everybody. He wants to, and then he's, the poor man, Kanye. I don't hate Kanye because he's crazy.
Yeah.
See,
I'm glad you brought up Jim Brown, because I think
Yes.
that's something that people don't really, as most of us know, that Jim Brown was definitely one of those icons in the community that people really respected, and they held him in high regard, and they looked at him as a man. He was supposed to be a man's man.
There you go.
And the fact that you see him sitting at the White House, and he has completely destroyed his legacy.
Yes, he
I don't know
has.
what they. I mean, he said, "I don't want nothing.
Well, the program.
I just want to serve."
The program you're talking about, Brother American, and Jim brought it in. He brought it in with Achilles Sherrill's brother, Bo Taylor, who both deserve extreme respect for what they did. Bo Taylor is not with us anymore.
I know.
His
but,
program, and I want to give, the program was fundamental. It gave a strong foundation. Since then, American has basically, the American program has basically became a life skills program, and there's a few that are still carrying out. The program itself structurally was an excellent program. Jim Brown has always had issues, and we have not brought those issues to the table. He's had issues in his family structure, etc. And this is one of the things I have to say, and I think I said it on one of the first earlier shows. We have got to stop making excuses for the people in our community, and we've got to call them to the task. Now, yes, if we can help them to become the best they can be, by all means, but we make too many excuses for our people. We want to call out everything else, but we won't call out the destructive nature when we see that poison within our own community. And we don't have time for that no more. If you say you're going to lead and you're going to stand for the people, you got to stand on that banner. You got to stand on that mark, or we going to hold you accountable. That's why our communities are in such disarray right now. We can talk about all the exterior forces, which are many, multiplied, but we also got to talk about what we do internally and how we can correct that cancer to move ourselves forward.
Yeah.
Amen. I know you on point, but I mean, seriously, I listened to y'all last week. I didn't call in because it was so good, but man, I on this one here, because I watched that whole, I could not believe this man got all them reporters, and they wasn't calling nobody. I mean, they wasn't calling nobody on nothing. They let him say anything. I love you. I love you. Let me give you a hug. He cursing, and I'm like, if this man ain't crazy, and they never shut him out.
No,
Because they want to expose black people like that. They like to let black people look like, look at them niggas up there. Look at him. He don't even know how to act at the White House. But they let him get done that. Now, T.I. said, they invited T.I. to the White House, but T.I. said, let me bring Farrakhan with me.
Yes, sir.
He didn't get some back, did he? He didn't get no invite, did he?
No, that's
So,
right.
see, they're going to ask you they're going to call you, they're going to hold you to the code. But anyway, I'll give somebody else a chance, because I just really had to.
Well, like always, I always appreciate you calling, and I missed
Love
you
your
last
call,
week.
brother. We love you, soldier.
Okay, man. So
What you say, Zulu?
I said, man, I missed your call last week, man. I appreciate you calling in this week, brother.
I was on point so good. I couldn't help. I couldn't talk. I couldn't say nothing.
And we love to hear from you, brother. We love to hear you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
What was you doing when you was listening to that, Rosa?
Me, I can't help but feel this is exasperating. It's true because I feel like as youth, now you look at the news, right? And you see stories as the one Kanye West and Donald Trump. And you think to yourself, well, you know, this is what sells. This is what's cool. So what am I going to do? I'm going to head to school with a red hat because this is cool.
Right.
And it's sad because we actually we allow this individual to have a spotlight, you know? And we have people like Stephen Curry and all those individuals who are actually activists, who actually are willing to talk about on the issues that matter, issues that affect our Black community, and they don't get invited.
Right.
You know, they only do invite certain people whom they know will ridicule. Sadly, they will ridicule this group of individuals, you know, who have worked so hard in this country to be where they are today.
Right.
And they invite Kanye West for him to, you know, for people to laugh. And the international community is watching. And it's true what Dr. Bashir is saying. You know, people are watching internationally, and they've allowed him this platform. So what are people going to think?
Right.
Yeah.
What's funny is I think that Donald Trump and Kanye West are very much alike.
Hey, I was just about to say the same thing. I was going to say, no, he took it right out of my mouth.
Yeah, because I mean, they go on these rants.
Yeah.
They don't barely make any sense, and they're liked by the same people.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So they got the same audience. They're all entertainers.
Yep.
They like to get the the attention, and they both may be suffering from the same mental disorder.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Because they're just the same. I mean, because the tone and the things that Donald Trump says on the podium as the president of the United States, you know, I mean, are just so outlandish. He's so unprofessional. He's so just out there, you know. And these people take all of that in, and it just shows. You know, one of the things that and I want to just say this real quick because we got to move on. But you know, as a kid, I always wondered when you think about all of the savage things that happen in our country and in the world, and things that human beings did to each other, such as, you know, public hangings and, you know, the mistreatment of human beings, you know, and it's one thing to dislike someone, but it's another thing to be able to stomach watching someone else being hung or, you know, or actually being, you know, mutilated, right? And it always, I'm like, man, how did that happen? And you know, it happens so often, and it happens so long. I mean, what kind of individuals would deal with that? And during this presidency, it kind of made sense. I think the same people, when you see those public hangings, and you see individuals standing around watching it, because I mean, who wants to sit around and watch somebody get hung, right? You think who wants to do that? And there would be, like, you know, people just watching it.
Yeah.
And now the same people that are really like that, listening to some of the same things that Donald Trump says, in my opinion, right? And I'm going to put it out there. I think of the same people it's just the new generation of the same people that would have no issues with public hangings, you know, that have no feelings for human beings. I mean, they're the same type of individuals. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of one of the things that kind of comes to light. And I'm always the type of person, I don't want to get spiritual on the radio right now, but I'm the type of person that believes everything happens for a reason. And sometimes, I mean, people expose themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so the reality of it is that, can you imagine 20 years from now where people will look at and see these individuals and what they said on social media? It's like you've been exposed. You don't realize it, but what you've said is the things that you're saying now is the same thing you would have been, just like those individuals were 20 years ago or 40 years ago that could deal with the lynchings. Correct? You know.
And it's a trip because when you was just giving that description about people sitting back and watching that public hanging, it remind me of just Kanye West standing there with all the reporters standing around looking at him putting the African-American community on the news. And they sitting there with their microphones, you know, and that's what it reminds me of. You know, what I wanted to ask a quick question. Do you think that this was a play to combat what we just seen with Nike and Colin Powell? Do you think that by them throwing Kanye out there?
Talking about Colin Kaepernick?
Yeah, Colin Kaepernick, I mean. not Colin. Yeah,
You
Colin
think
Kaepernick.
you said you thought like a ploy?
Do you think? Yeah. Do you think there was like they just threw that out there because of the situation that just happened with Colin Kaepernick? They just wanted to put their version out there of to take that focus off of that whole thing.
I mean, I think that basically I don't know if it's necessarily to respond to the Colin Kaepernick, because you're saying, is it blackface time that we have a black man in the black movement now, when this is kind of to counteract what's going on? I mean, I think that basically, there's so many things going on, and I think that now that we're monolithic when it comes to things that we can digest. And I think that maybe, with the things, I mean, all those things like the confirmation of the Kavanaugh situation, the all those individuals that were part of the cabinet that were actually getting indicted, we don't really hear about those things anymore. So I think that and as well as the fact that they probably were not responding, the first responders, that issue that was going on with Florida, because you got to remember that this was actually right in the middle of the time period in which you had all of the natural disaster that was going on in Florida. You didn't hear anybody talking about any of that. I mean, you haven't seen any of that at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And right now the news media is consumed with Kanye West.
Yeah.
So nobody really is talking about it. So sometimes I think that basically, what we're watching now is a minstrel show. And I think that you have a lot of blackface, whether it's Kanye West, whether it's Jim Brown, or whether it's even the president himself painting himself in blackface. You're just seeing a show right now. We're not really seeing, it's real reality TV, and it's made a mockery of the office of the president. And the one thing that Donald Trump has done is he's changed the legacy of George Bush, because can you imagine that people, I've heard so many people think, like, for example, McCain even invited George Bush to his funeral, right? And you think about how bad and how stupid we used to say that George Bush was in comparison to Donald Trump. How does he look? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, wow.
So I'm saying that kind of jokingly,
Yeah.
but the reality of it is he has changed. We will not, up until the time that Donald Trump was elected in the office, we would have thought that George Bush was a minstrel show. We thought that he wasn't smart.
Yeah.
But he was when you can say that George Bush was more dignified than the president that we have now, that's
but I think we're missing a bigger point.
That's correct.
I think we're really missing a bigger point here, Brother Ali. There's an old African proverb that says, if there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm. What does the presidency and that inner circle keep amassing? It keeps amassing power. See, I think what we're looking at is a situation where those people, that select few that has that controlling power, that decision-making power, not only in this country, but on a worldwide perspective, I think they're seeing some of that power base be lost. And some of the things that have transpired on the social level, that power base was starting to shift. So what I think you see is a repositioning of these people based on the acquisition of that power and stabilizing that power. I think all these little artificial extensions, I call them secondary activities, they are distractions for what's really going on. The one thing that this president has been able to do for himself, his family, and his constituents is increase his power base. And if we really look deep at what is transpiring, all the external things, even if they impeach him, if he's removed out of office, etc., for the most part, he has kept, increased, and multiplied his ability and his influence on an economic scope to be able to engage on a worldwide perspective. And I think if you look at the political power base that, and especially in the Republican Party, although Democrats are just as bad in their own right, you will see that these individuals, the majority of those congresspersons, senators, etc., they're millionaires, they're multimillionaires, and then they go right into that lobbying perspective after they leave office. And what does that do? Add to their income base. So I think we can't extract the power from that. And then back to Kanye, I don't care what individuals externally are trying to do. If we if we allow them or anybody to dictate how we move, that is on us. That's not to remove the external factors and the people trying to undermine what we stand for. But we've got to start reinforcing our own strength, our own capability, and our own vision, and saying at the end of the day, where I go and where I am, that responsibility is on me. And I am not going to let nobody put me in a derogatory position. I am not going to let anybody downcast me or my people. I am not going to allow to be seen in this type of negated corrupt mindset. I don't care what anybody brings to the table. So we've got to do function. We got to fight those exterior forces, but we also got to look at self and say, what do we have to do to reinforce and change and become our own cavalry?
Yeah. I mean, I'm go ahead.
Oh, and I feel like on the topic of hate, I feel like they're trying to kind of impose this new type of hate, not only kind of expand the whole agenda of racism and discrimination and systematic oppression, but also to impose this new self-hate within the people that are in those communities.
Or just bring it back out.
Yeah. And that's how I feel. Like they're trying to have these individuals kind of look at themselves in the mirror and not feel proud of themselves, not feel proud of their accomplishments, but rather question themselves and really question if they really have suffered because, they've been oppressed, or if, self-hate.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, I think that as a community, I've always been the type of person who always felt that whenever you have an individual within that breaks ranks, so to speak, you let them go and you keep moving, because you can't, in other words, it's like, I kind of have a paramilitary type of mindset when it comes to when you're trying to achieve some sort of goal, whether you're talking about an organization, whether you're talking about a society or a community. Then I think that sometimes, you have to basically let individuals go, because you cannot allow one individual, because he is not that important. And I think that basically, whenever you think that you have an individual that has that much importance to allow an entire community to pause and be concerned about him going up, let's just be real. He's just, not to minimize the significance of people who are artists. He is an artist. That's really what he's done. And basically, and he's done some good work within the arts. But at the same time, I don't believe that we should, as a community, it's great for discussion and it's very entertaining, but the reality of it is that's what it was. That's why we're sitting here talking.
Yes.
Not because of the fact that he did anything that was beneficial at all to the community, or that he's an individual that could impact our lives, so to speak. But the fact that he was there to entertain. And that's pretty much what he's always been, even when he distracted the award show and he ran up and made that crazy remark, or whenever, he needs that type of attention. And he got that attention, and he had the floor. He sitting in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. So, sometimes, man, we talk about exposing who you are. That definitely, and then the fact that he talked about Chirac, backing into our whole issue of community violence.
But he didn't talk about the external factors that were also causing the violence that were non-black. Okay, let's call it this. But I want to say one thing. When you look at and you said it so well a second ago, Brother Ali. You said we've got to let them go. Total agreement with you there, and that brings us back to the book. But if we have no strategic blueprints, if we are not clear on the vision and objectives, if we don't constantly meet as a community and have strategic planning sessions that define our direction, we're going to allow people like Conway and others to speak for us, because there's no check and balance. If we could have clearly laid out that blueprint blueprint in that venue, and it probably wouldn't have been that venue because of the simple fact of who they invited. But if it's a clear this blueprint or this structure that's out there, when somebody hears a Conway yay, that's what I want to give him, a Conway yay, because he's off the chart. They can say, well, oh no, these communities, they're saying this is where they want to go. The communities speak for themselves. Conway's counterproductive to where these communities say they want to go. So you throw the question mark up in, is this man really speaking for these communities? But if it is not clear in terms of our critical objectives, if it is not clear where we're trying to go both in the short, interim, and long term as a people, we're going to leave holes in there for anybody to come in and define what that end vision looks like.
Well, it just shows what the respect that they have for our community. First of all, you know, what other community would you have an artist and a retired football player called to the Oval Office, right? You know, it's like those are the only leaders that we have in our community is an athlete and a rapper. See, you know, so the thing about it is that we have professors, we have educators, we have people who are civil rights activists, other than, you know, serious civil rights activists. Well, only call Maxine Waters in there and talk to her about it. You see what I mean? I mean, so, you know, it kind of, you know, so it just kind of gives you an idea of how serious they are. I mean, you're having a forum to talk about criminal justice reform. And, you know, we have, obviously, what is the sister that wrote the book, The New Jim Crow?
Yeah, you're talking about...
Can you look that up? See what she was? Okay.
Her name's slipping my
So,
mind.
you know, so you have a lot of individuals who are very intelligent. You have a lot of individuals who are very smart within our communities and very well versed on that subject matter. But instead of trying to, you know, call those individuals, they're going to call a rapper. You know what I mean? So it's kind of disrespectful from that perspective, as if we don't have nobody else in our community that can speak on the subject. But I know that one of the things that I want to talk about, you have something else you want to
I just
hit on
wanted
that?
to add to that, though. But why are we expecting something else
Right.
from this administration?
Exactly.
See, so, you know, we got to look at that. But go ahead, brother.
That's it. Now, I was just thinking about I mean, I actually went to go see that movie this weekend. The
Hate You
girl,
Give.
The Hate You Give.
right?
Yeah, it was an excellent movie, man. I mean, it's really, you know, they only had it in selected theaters this weekend, and they're going to be having it in all the other theaters, the open, I guess, nationwide next weekend. But it was an excellent movie. I mean, it really was touching on police brutality, but there was a little bit of because it was in Chicago, the backdrop was Chicago. And what was interesting was there was still some issues addressing the whole idea of our inner city issues and our inner city violence and how to deal with inner city violence. And trying to, and as we're looking at the book, and just to expand on our discussion that we were talking about last week about the violence within the community, that, you know, and gangs. You know, obviously gangs manifest itself differently within different cities, but pretty much it's almost the same, you know, where you're going and how we're dealing with that gang, you know, situation. And, you know, and then the book is excellent that this Peace in the Hood, which could actually be used as a blueprint across the country when it comes to us trying to figure out ways to, first of all, understand, and also, number two, how to deal with gang violence in our communities and violence in general. I'm trying to figure out. I would love to. I mean, there's a lot of forums. We always have. I'm not much of a talker. You know, I'm tired of town hall meetings. I'm tired of, you know, and crying and, you know, and it's almost the same thing. All you hear is rhetoric, and you don't really hear any, you know, as a community, how we're never really coming together. And part of the reason why is because of those external forces. Whenever we have organizations that are put in a situation where they're really trying to do something and trying to make that difference, then you really don't get a lot of attention, because we're waiting for our master to tell us that that this organization should be there. Just like your organization Bilal Motivatium, which is an excellent excellent organization, and you're an individual that could really make a big difference in the community addressing these issues. It's great. It's something that people should co-sign and tag on to. But the problem, of course, is that they're waiting. They don't. You're talking. You see, there's this organization, but you don't want to give them the money to support the organizations that you have these young men in. You don't want to give them that attention, that it deserves in order to deal with what's going on in these organizations. I mean, so, Doc, I don't really, sometimes I'm at lost because I see where we don't, step up to the plate. We have a lot of churches. We got a church on every corner, but they're not really doing the things that they need to do as far as getting involved and, other than maybe meeting the president every now and then and trying to do what they need to do to make sure that these organizations are providing something for our youth to move forward, and that we're dealing with issues about financial literacy, issues about, these rites of passages, all these organizations, all these issues that you're talking about, Doc, we're just not seeing that happen.
And you said something, again, so important. The one word you use, wait. We are waiting. What are we waiting for? When you look at every major movement that really had impacted the world, usually it was started by an individual. No arrogance meant, but when I started KCAATV, when I started the License to Operate movement, they were throwing everything in the world at us. They didn't want us. They called us the small shop from South Central. The brothers from the street who used to be gang members who were doing A, B, and C. You talk about Bilal's organization, the same thing. We have to have the type of resiliency that we will go out against all odds and say, regardless of what it takes, we are going to do what we need to do to set the agenda to move our communities, especially us as men. As men, we don't have an option in the process. If we don't leave a foundation for our young adults, if we don't leave a template for our young adults, shame on us. That's part of manhood development. So we have got to go out there and we've got to concentrate on producing the quantitative results. The reason that our organization is known worldwide now, we just got back from the UN, and I say that with no arrogance whatsoever. I don't say that to impress you. I say it to impress upon you. It can be done. They are looking at our practitioner-based approaches. They are looking at our models. They are looking at what we have done to bridge these communities on a local, national, and regional scale. Back to the book. The book was one of the hardest things for me to write. It wasn't hard because I didn't know what needed to be done to some degree, but putting it all together and then getting it in a format that people could buy into it, both community, both decision makers, etc. We feel we've done that, but I want to say the book, all the book is, Brother Ali, Brother Bilal, Sister Rosa, is a template. It's a template that I throw out there with the expectations of hope you'll take this and make it better than I made it. See, we've got to continuously drop templates. That's what Stop and Frisk is, Brother Ali, that you do so well. All of these things are tools that are being put in place. It's like anchors. We're putting anchors on the ground for the community to attach to. So if we leave the process, the thing still moves forward. And the other thing we got to check is some of our so-called community motivators who are basically burnt biscuits sitting in the oven. They sell their soul out, and they sell the community for those trinkets that come down from the municipality, etc. That's what I go back to, holding our people accountable. So we got to do situation. But lastly, and to sum all that up, we have got to continuously go out there and be engaged and be energized, knowing that there is going to be so much resistance against what we're trying to bring to the table. And when that resistance hits us, we've got to be willing to absorb it and keep moving the process forward. Lastly on that is why those of us that are out there got to really stay and reinforce each other, because at the end of the day, when we're traumatized, all we got to look for is each other.
I know that one of the things that when we talk about some of the issues that we're trying to do, I think that basically when it comes to developing some sort of paradigm that's going to allow us to embrace these you know, these programs and some of the structures and some of the things that we have that we believe that's going to help the community move forward. You know, I think that we are afraid of nationalism. And basically what happens with nationalism is that basically, you know, it's almost like, in many words, it's something, you know, we're not, some things you just can't have. You can't have the best of both worlds sometimes. And in other words, you know, it's kind of like Disneyland or Disney World. I mean, people are kind of like seeing it and saying, this is really what I want the world to be like. But the reality of it is that we're not there. And the question is, what are you really willing to do in order to achieve the things that we're looking for? And sometimes you can't have two things. Sometimes they don't exist. And oftentimes the question is, are you just comfortable being in a particular place and just dealing with the way things really are and trying to bogart your way into something that you've been trying to bogart your way into for over 300 years? Or are you willing to accept the fact that in order for me to achieve a certain amount of dignity and respect, that there's going to be some sacrifices? And oftentimes we're not willing to do the things that you know, we're not willing to put ourselves on the line for other individuals, because we feel like, am I going to put my family on the line? Am I going to put my career on the line? Am I going to put my livelihood on the line for people who may not do the same thing for me? And oftentimes what you get is, I remember one show I was watching on television, and actually it was a show on the Jamie Foxx show, where this guy was talking about, he was always in his kufi and he was always in his dashiki, and he was like, don't eat pork, right? And then Jamie actually was, you see that? Yeah, he went in there and he basically didn't want to sell out. He says, I'm not going to sell out. I'm not going to be involved in it. And as soon as Jamie gave up the gig, the guy that was against him for doing it, who said, brother, you're going to sell your soul, brother, you're going to do this, as soon as he gave up the gig, he volunteered to take Jamie's place. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, so we're living really in this whole world where we have to kind of make a decision, grab those individuals who are willing to move with us, identify them, and kind of move on. Yeah. And that's, I think that we're really in that kind of, you know, it sounds like a dark place, and it doesn't sound really entertaining. I know that we're looking at getting out to vote and being involved in the democratic system and trying to make changes through the system itself, and hoping that basically when we continue to do that, and we can do both, but I think at some point in time, I think we really have to ask the question, are we really willing to do what it really takes to get what we need and get what we deserve as a community?
Yeah, you know, I think that, you know, the saying that everyone has their place, I think that stands as true. I think everyone has their place, and I think those individuals who, like me and the doc, and you and yourself, that's out on the, you know, that's out in the streets just trying to do something. I think that we have to network more with other individuals as well, because that's what's going to bring about the change. Because there's too many people sitting on their couches saying that nothing is going to change. I mean, that's the type of reality that we're living in today. A lot of people don't think that they can affect change, but the ones that know that they can affect change, those are the forces that need to network. Those are the forces that need to, you know, bring about this change, you know, because that's what it's going to take. You know, a lot of people just too complacent. They feel that there's no change is never going to come.
I mean, the question is the system really for us? Are we really in a situation where you says, look, we have, you know, the crime rate within the communities, you know, the conditions within the communities, you know, no matter what has happened, our reality has consistently stayed the same. You oftentimes have to ask yourself this question: what do we really need to do as a community to really garner that change? You know, when you're, you know, obviously we need to vote, but people feel like whether there's a Democrat in office, whether there's a Republican in office, even oftentimes when we have black people in political positions or in governmental positions or leadership positions, you know, it still doesn't really change. Like whether Barack Obama is the president of the United States, or whether someone else is the president of the United States, we're still dealing with some of the same reality. We're still getting the same amount of individuals are getting killed, and the police are still doing what they're doing. So the question is, if we cannot change our conditions through the democratic process, then what do we need to do to change our condition, number one? And number two, are we really willing to do it? And if you're not really willing to do it, then sometimes you have to step back and accept things for the way that they are.
Well, I would add to that, and both you brothers bring up excellent points, but we need a holistic wraparound. We need to be clear on, we need survival plans that are going to define our direction. And one of the things I want to concentrate on briefly is what we're talking about here is comprehensive community intervention. We're talking about coming into a community and intervening, at all levels. There's 5 basic things that any type of community mobilization empowerment basically ingests. Number 1, we have to be able to respond to the needs of our community. Number 2, we have to be able to operate on every level, on the street level, on the level of municipalities, on the law level, etc. Then number 3, we've got to be able to collaborate. We've got to be able to bring those partnerships that you're mentioning, Bilal, to the table, which best can drive the process. Number 4, we have to be able to build bridges. We have to be able to deal with people that we normally wouldn't deal with. And then number 5, we have to be able to engage. We have to be able to bring out those venues that are going to become those templates I talked about earlier. There's an old saying, true to nature. People do not take action until they become totally dissatisfied. You notice in every community, when a person usually takes action, for the most part, some people do it because they feel the need, but when it comes to the individual level, it's usually until that individual or that individual's family or something within that structure harms or hurts that individual that they decide to get up and get into action. We can't wait for those individuals. We've got to create these plans, and we've got to start moving and putting in place that agenda. Whoever comes on board or whatever role they play, fine, but the agenda should be establishing the dictate. And that's one of the things I attempt to do in the book. We talk about the gang violence because the gang violence petrifies most communities, but once that violence is dealt with, you got to deal with all those other needs, and that's where that response mechanism comes into play. So we've got to be really serious about looking at what our community is up against, looking at what's going on with our community, and really bringing a comprehensive structure that are going to be able to deal holistically across the board with what those needs are. Man, we got some serious work to do.
And the problem is we shouldn't. We do have a serious, I agree with you 110%. You know what I was thinking about? What I always think about is historically. And we think about all the leaders and all the movements that we've had in the past. And I want to ask this question, and I want that's the answer to the question. I know we don't have much time. When you look at the paradigms and the movements in the past, what has been the most productive movement for African American people, in your opinion, Bilal?
The most productive?
Yeah, that basically has been the most organized and productive movement in.
I don't know, man. I look at the Panthers.
Okay. What about you, Rosa?
I think overall the civil rights movement.
And what about you, Don?
The civil rights movement, certain components in there, the Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, and Marcus Garvey movement.
The Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
The Nation of Islam had, you know what, man?
Because it continued.
The structure.
The businesses. So you had the economic aspect of it. You had, it was, with all of its flaws, it was the most productive movement, in my opinion. And again, I recognize every movement had its flaws.
Yeah, but yes, you're spot on.
Yeah.
The one movement that put the structure in place,
exactly,
that put the template in place was the nation. And the other thing that you got to mention in terms of refinement of the people, IMGT, et cetera.
And they can say whatever you want. I give credit where credit is due, and when I look at it and I think about, hey, what do we put together that really addresses the social economic system? And it was a plan. They implemented the plan. They were making, it worked.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? Ultimately, of course, there was it had its issues, like I said. Like anything else. But I'm saying that basically when you look at that, it was not something that was a theory.
No.
Right?
Practical
it was something that practically applied and practically worked, and it took people, they had killers.
And it's still here.
They're still here. They had killers that they were able to put into a situation and make them, what they are, man.
We used to fish.
Yeah.
That's what we called it, fishing.
Yeah. So at any rate, man, we're here, man. That went by real quick. But at any rate, man, I thank you, Doc, again. We still didn't get as far into it as I really wanted to. But on behalf of the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir, thank you for tuning in. And until next week, we'll see you at the same time, same channel, same place. And until then, stay blessed.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292 FQ Riverside, and K293 CF Moreno Valley.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Plenty of college football to recap, and of course, NLCS Game 7. I'm Pete Fox. It'll be the Brewers and Dodgers. Game 7 at Miller Park. A win for Milwaukee. It would be their second World Series appearance in their history. Last time, 1982. Here's Ryan Braun talking about what it would mean to him and this organization.
It's just about the amount of time I've spent here, everything I've been through in my career while playing here, the relationships I have, not just with the players, but with the coaches, the strength coaches, the clubhouse attendants, the security guards, the ushers. I've spent so much time in the city. I have such a special relationship with, the fans, with the whole community here. And just understanding how much that would mean to all of them is the thing that makes me most excited about hopefully, making it to the second World Series in Brewers history tomorrow.
It's Yolis Chassin for the home team versus Walker Buehler for the Dodgers. College football. Washington State has a 7-0 lead on number 12, Oregon in the Palouse. Vanderbilt leading number 14, Kentucky in Lexington, 7-0. Number 2, Ohio State and Purdue are scoreless. That one just underway. Number 21, South Florida, still trailing UConn. Early in the second quarter, it's 7-0 Huskies. Central Florida at East Carolina tied at 3. LSU at number 5, still up on number 22, Mississippi State, 7-3 at Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. Number 23, Wisconsin, a winner over Illinois, 49-20. Temple upset number 20, Cincinnati, 24-17. That was in overtime. Number 19, Iowa shuts out Maryland 23-0. Number 15 was Washington, a winner over Colorado, 27-13. Number 9, Oklahoma cruises. Number 6, Michigan beats number 24, Michigan State in East Lansing, 21-7. I'm Pete Fox, NBC Sports Radio.
This is KCAA.
Portions of the day's programming are reproduced by means of electrical transcriptions or tape recording.
To the Batmobile. Are you watching Star Trek?